Good morning, everyone. Thomas Fleming here. You can see I have perhaps a familiar location for those that you have been watching these for a while. This is one of the areas that I started in. We're house sitting, so I get to be back. Coffee in the morning. Well, we have all the luxuries of home because it is a home. But I'm not jealous because I like what I'm doing. So we will continue camping, at least for a little while, until God tells me I don't need to. And that's the key to pretty much everything in life. Don't have your own agenda. Everything you think about and do should be due to God, because He already has a plan for you. And if you follow His plan, you will enjoy it, you will like everything you do, you will be happy to go to work, which is what I am. So follow God's plan. He knows you better than you do. I do have a road out in front. This is a residential area. It's not a subdivision, but it's residential. So there's a road over there. There's other houses around. The people here have a small dog. It comes out in the yard when you let it. But it's happy. It's an older dog. It's happy to sleep inside most of the time. Okay. We've been talking about war, where Satan dwells and what he tries to do. What are his primary tactics? And you can see these tactics used by anybody who's going to war. You lie, for one thing. You don't tell the people the truth because the people would not tolerate it. If the people of this country, and I'm in the United States, if this country knew what our government officials were doing, they'd put a stop to it. One way or another, they'd put a stop to it. We have the Second Amendment for a reason. But they're not using it because they're being lied to. And when the lie is no longer usable, it'll be too far gone to be able to recover. Okay, so I'm not going to talk politics on that. That's just find yourself a good, reliable news source, and you know what's going on. I like Glenn Beck. I'll watch Bill O'Reilly occasionally. Fox News is off my list now. You can find Megyn Kelly too. She's got her own channel. And you can find people on YouTube that will talk. Lots of them. Just be sure to vet them pretty good. In our news, tornado damage in Texas. Pray for them. There's going to be tornadic activity all over the place coming up. We're getting big storms coming across the Pacific. They do a pretty good job of predicting the weather nowadays because they've got modern technology, but they're not 100%. I'm just glad it's not raining today, but it is overcast. Now, they said Saturday and Sunday we're going to get some sunshine. I'll believe it when I see it. But most of it will be out of here on Sunday afternoon, so we may get a chance to use it. Okay, so we're fighting a war. We're fighting a spiritual war, but there is definitely some physical side to it. Ukraine is fighting a physical war with Russia. Iran is still arming their proxies around Israel, giving them newer, better missiles, ones that would be harder to shoot down, putting Israel into a bad position. They could completely destroy Israel, wipe them off the face of the earth, and then start off going around the world killing Jews. That's what the Ayatollahs want, at any cost. The United States is not going to be a big help. We're about done. We're giving all of our arms to fight in Ukraine. We're giving up all of our ability to protect ourselves. These people are breaking the law on a daily basis. They should be in prison. Instead, there are political leaders. Joe Biden's son just got off the hook for what many others have gone to prison for. It's a two-tiered system. Us and them. That sounds like dividing, doesn't it? Well, that's our topic for today. How do you win a war? Against somebody far superior than you? Divide and conquer. When I was younger, I would play video games. I learned if you're going to take on, 10 bad guys on the screen, and they could be people or just plain monsters. I typically like monsters. I don't like the thought of shooting at people. But in any case, you can't take 1 on 10 unless you're way out of the league. You go back to an earlier area, you might find them like that. But the way to beat them is to lure them out one at a time, maybe 2. And eventually you get down to just 1 or 2 left. You divide and conquer. That tactic works and has been written about since the 6th century. Probably before, but we don't have records of it. Of course, that's not a godly thing for us to have to think about. God wants us to be united. United around Him, of course. Satan wants us to be united around him and his lies. So let me take a look at my notes. One of the things that our media and our people trying to take over, they want you to think that you can get to heaven by being good. Meow. Meow. I have a cat. There's one of 4 or 5 that are outside, and inside there's 5, I think. Meow. Meow. Yeah. These ones outside are kind of skittish. The ones inside will come right up to you. And the fact that that one sort of came up to me is good. He's getting familiar, but we won't be here long. Okay, we've covered the lie. Anything that our government can do to divide, they do. They've been doing race baiting and dividing for years. It gives them something to take the focus off. I've talked about it before. Politicians are like magicians. Don't watch this hand, watch this hand, and this one's in the till pulling money out. It's all about power. Money's part of power. But they're giving away all of our money. They're giving away billions and billions of dollars of our money that we've paid into with taxes. Did they ask us? Of course not. It's no longer for the people, by the people, unless you define people as those in power. And that's all they do. They get elected, and then they spend the next 4 years getting reelected. Do they do anything for us? They may do some showy things out in the front to make it look like they're doing something, but in reality, they're doing nothing. We haven't completely eradicated race fighting yet, but we could have if the government would get behind it and help us to get together again. We haven't completely eliminated gender equality, men and women gender equality, let alone all the 20 million other ones that are out there that they've invented just to divide. Why would you create these? The population of gays is a fraction of, it's 1-2% maybe. Even if it were 10%, it's still less than the overall population. Yet you'd think it was the predominant, because they're getting all the awards, they're getting all the attention. For men to compete in women's sports, atrocious. There's no history to worry about. We're gonna be over with in a little bit. But if there was a history, I think they'd have to rewrite this, take away all the trophies, and basically wipe this off the face of any history book. Because if you can have a man compete in a woman's sport, even if there was a physical reason for them changing gender, if they spent most of their childhood growing up as a boy, then they have stronger muscles. It's the way it works. I didn't invent this. You don't like it, talk to God. But on that same line, I think I'm going to go get a motorcycle and enter the Tour de France bicycle race. It identifies as a bicycle. It's got 2 wheels. It's absurd, it's stupid, and the government is backing it. Why? Divide and conquer. Get us butting heads, and we're not going to notice what they're doing. Some of us do, but we're also, and they know this, as Christians, we tend to be more passive-aggressive. We're not going to go get our arms and storm the White House. That's not the way to do it. And we know now, because of their January 6th thing that they did, we're not even going to walk in the door if they invite us, because they're going to turn it around and say we tried to destroy it. There's a couple of people that are in jail over it. They shouldn't be. It was a setup. Don't trust this government further than you can throw an aircraft carrier. And that's sad. Our government. But I mean, we're living in a time where the government is telling us what to do. Christ came to earth during a time when the Romans were telling the Israelites what to do. They didn't like it, but they had to comply, because if they didn't, we saw what happened. They started rebelling. After Christ left, they started rebelling. In 70 AD, Rome destroyed Jerusalem, killed millions, destroyed the temple, and they were so adamant about keeping him out, they renamed the land Palestine. That's where the term comes from, basically. There were Palestinian nomads that traveled around. You see these movies with the caravans of camels. That's what they were. They set their tents up. They didn't have a town or a city or want one. They were traveling merchants, basically. They didn't need a country. The idea that they have to have one is divide and conquer. The Muslim religion, divide and conquer. Let's get the Muslims and the Jews fighting against each other. And then within the Jews, you've got the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Let's keep them fighting. And against the Muslims, you've got sects over there. The Shiites. They were fighting thousands of years before they got involved with the Jews. And the idea of Muhammad being their savior, they didn't have any way to unite themselves. So they took him and put him together and made this superhero out of him. They had so many different versions of the Quran that they eventually got together and decided which one would be the one that they want to use. And as they were voting, they figured out which one was the most popular, not which one was the most accurate. Divide and conquer. The Dome of the Rock. It was never built as a religious shrine to Islam. It was a shrine to the Jewish temple. It said so on pamphlets in the early 1900s. And then somebody goes, why don't we just declare it a Muslim holy place so that they can never build their temple? Good idea. So they did, divide and conquer. That dome was not gold until the 1930s, I think it was. Saudi Arabia chipped in the gold, paid for it. It's constant, divide and conquer. If they can get all the world fighting amongst themselves, divide and conquer, that's Satan. He wants a one world government, which he's in charge of. And he's going to come real close to it. Because the world, believing the lie, will help him set it up. The harlot's doing the bulk of the work right now. Branch fell down behind me. So I've talked about some of these. We've got, divide and conquer, race against race, religion against religion. How many different religion versions of Christianity do we have? There's different versions of the Muslim religion. You got the Sunnis and the Shiites. Two big factions. There's a couple of little ones. We have gender. Men versus women. Men and women versus whatever. Nationalities. You're from this country. Well, I'm from this country. You can have fighting over that. Remember the old saying, condemn the sin, not the sinner. So let's take a look at 1 Corinthians. And let's go to chapter 10. I'm going to start in well, it's all a good chapter, but I'll start in let's go to 12, 10, 12, 1 Corinthians. Therefore let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as common to man. Whatever you're dealing with, other people have dealt with it before, men and women, whatever. There's no new temptation. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. If you keep succumbing to temptation, then you're not learning. You need to get stronger and stronger. And eventually, you'll be able to say no to the temptation, at which point Satan will move on. You don't like being tempted, you don't like falling into the sin, whatever it is, work towards fighting it. It's divide and conquer. Satan's pitting you against God. Don't let him do that. Verse 14, therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourself what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, it is not the communion of, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? Yeah, there's squirrels here too. For we, though many, are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. We're all united. There's no reason for us to be fighting amongst ourselves. But yet we do. Even in things that we don't know, we fight amongst ourselves. Are you pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib? Now, I'm pre-trib, and I teach that, but I'm tolerant against mid-trib, or pre-wrath. Post-trib I can't fully be tolerant of, because my God would not subject his bride to the tribulation, the wrath of God. We're not subject to wrath, yet the second half is the wrath of God. He wouldn't do that, and he says he wouldn't. Yet the post-trib people, I have the most trouble with. I try to say, look, let's be Christians, accept the gospel, and then we can agree to disagree on the rest. I can't even do that. They won't let it go. It's like their whole life is spent convincing everybody that it's post-trib. I say, look, there's a difference of 7 years. Let's just see what happens. If we're right, we're no first. We still got to be ready. It doesn't matter which one. And the thing is, there are 3 tribs, so everybody's seeing their elephant from a different point of view. There is a pre-trib, there is a mid-trib, and there is a final one at the end. The final one at the end is where God collects all of his people off the earth. One man working in the field, and the other one's God. The other one's gone. It's post-trib. Mid-trib is to get us, the Christians, out that became Christians from the pre-trib time frame to the middle, to get out before everything really gets bad. We know that part of that will be the 2 witnesses, 144,000. Once they're gone, then we get the wrath of God. They get their chance. The first half of the tribulation, although tough, is not really the worst part. And on top of that, we're in the labor pains right now, so it's not a pleasant place out there. I don't recall there being as much rain, continual rain in the south as we're getting now. Okay, I'm going to turn over I got a dog howling in the background. 1 Corinthians 11:18. I'm going to go back to 17, the start of the chapter. Now, in giving these instructions, I do not praise you, since you have come together, not for the better, but for the worse. Sometimes we can come together and be united over the wrong thing. For first of all, when it comes together as a church, I hear that there are divisions among you, and in part I believe it. For there must also be factions among you, and those who are approved may be recognized among you. We set up cliques and factions in everything. I saw this in school growing up, at all ages. There were the popular kids. In high school and that, there was the popular kids that were involved in sports. There may be a person that's running for class president or something, but most of the time we don't pay much attention to that. But they get their followers and they get elected. people that get anything at that age aren't necessarily going anywhere with it. That's only teaching us to do things for rewards and to have followers following us around. It's not a reward on this earth that we want. Verse 20, therefore when you come together in one place, is it not to eat the Lord's Supper? For in eating each one takes his own supper ahead of others, and one is hungry and another is drunk. They come together, but they have the wrong attitude. Or do you despise the church of God and shame those who have nothing? What shall I say to you? Shall I praise you in this? I do not praise you. The church is supposed to be serving God, and God serves man. We're told to be servants. If you're eating a meal and people aren't. Now, we have to maintain our strength. That's okay. And if we're going to go out and serve, we need to be able to have our food so that we can do that. That's okay. But you can only there's no reason to eat to nourish ourselves, to get strong, if we're not going to use that strength to help others. God has a plan. He has a plan for you. Whatever you're doing right now, it may or may not be within God's plan. It doesn't matter. God can take us and mold us into what we need to be at any time in our life. You can start something at the end of your life that you haven't done before. And I'll talk about that maybe in the next video. And if you don't know how to do it, it doesn't matter. God does, and He's a good teacher. All right, while we continue to wait, we have a high watch time coming up next month. Every day should be high watch because we need to keep our lamps filled. But the 9th of Av is a standard day where things have happened. The temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. Other historical events involving Israel happened on that date. So it's got an ominous time from it. And we're talking about the Jewish calendar. We're not talking about ours. So it's July 23rd, I think, something like that. Getting close. Some are predicting that as a rapture date. I'm not, but I know people are. But I'd certainly say it's a high watch for something to happen. But until we're out of here, we're to be servants. Till we meet in the clouds, God bless.